So let me start the recording. Okay, fine. So let us get started. It's about the performance measurement in private sector organization. So when it comes to your course, this performance measurement is one of the key areas that we have identified. So in the latter part of your course, we are going to focus on the performance measurement. That is not just in the private sector organization, but even that extend for the public sector organizations as well. So today we'll be mainly looking at the context that you are familiar the most. It's a profit-oriented, the private sector performance measurement, and the next week we'll be taking on the performance measurement of the public sector. terutama අපි අද දවසේ සාකච්ඡා කරන්න යන්නේ වැදගත් මාතෘකාවක් ඔයාලගේ කෝස් එකේ තියෙන අපි අඳුර ගන්නවා ඒක ප්‍රධාන ඒරියා එකක් විදිහටත් ඔයා කෝස් මැනුවල් එකට රිෆර් කරොත් ඔයාට පෙනේවි performance measurement කියන එක අපි key filler එකක් විදිහට අඳුර ගන්නවා අපි. ඒතකොට මේ performance measurement යටතේ අපි කතා කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා කොහොමද private sector organization එක අපි performance එක measure කරන්නේ and කොහොමද අපි public sector එකේ performance එක measure කරන්න කියන කාරණාව. Give me 1 second. Right, okay, so I have just come back. It was important. Call. Yes, so there's a question. So what about the universities? Yes, universities are planned to be opened. So even as I got to know, so we'll be having that. We'll be starting most probably towards the end of April. We may be able to start the universities, right? Okay, so we've been discussing about the performance measurement. So first we'll discuss the lecture, and there are lots of questions coming around. So let us discuss the lecture first, and then let's move on to the discussion of your question, right? Okay. Now let's look at what are the learning outcomes. After studying this chapter, you should be able to apply the financial performance indicators in both manufacturing and service organization. So, you know, basically, when it comes to the organization, they are into the manufacturing of goods, or it may be either services. So those are the two main business organizations what we have. So therefore, in such a context, you must be able to apply the financial performance indicators. So in order to assess the performance, you need to have the indicators. So the performance measurement, in a simple sense, it's all about to what extent that you achieve your stated objectives and the vision and mission of the organization. So අපි සරලවම කිව්වොත් මොකක්ද මේ performance measurement කියන්නේ කියන එක. ඒතර පුතාලා දන්නවා ආයතනයක් ගත්තාම ආයතනයක vision එකක්, mission එකක්, ඒ වගේම objectives තියෙනවා. ඒතර මේ objectives කොච්චරක් දුරකට අපි achieve කරාද? අපේ vision එක, අපේ mission එක කොච්චරක් දුරකට අපි achieve කරනවද? අපි කොච්චර successful ද කියන එක තමයි අපි measure කරන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඒක තමයි performance measurement. So given the objectives, to what extent that you have achieved the given objectives, right? So ඒක තමයි basic understanding එක ඔයාලට තියෙන්න අවශ්‍ය. So in order to do so, you need to have some indicators, because you need to know whether the things are going as you planned. So you may be having certain what do you call that, the benchmark or some planned set of objectives or set of indicators, then to what extent that you have achieved that. So here you must be able to use the financial performance indicators. And thereafter, you are expected to discuss the issues surrounding the use of financial performance indicators to measure the performance. So when you are measuring the performance purely based on the financial performance indicators, the solely based on the financial performance indicators, that could be problematic. So there are certain issues involved. So we are going to look at what those issues are. So ඒ වගේම බලන්න යනවා යම්කිසි ආයතනයක් financial performance indicators විතරක් නම් භාවිතා කරන්නේ ඒකේ යම් යම් ගැටලු සහගත තත්ත්වයන් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒකට ඒ වගේ දේවල් මොනවද කියන එකත් අපි අද සාකච්ඡාව තුළ consider කරනවා. Then apply non-financial indicators in both manufacturing and the service businesses. So for an organization that who manufacture the goods as well as for a service organization, you must be able to apply the non-financial performance indicators. Right? Earlier we discussed the financial performance indicators, but there are certain limitations. So especially because of these limitations of these financial performance indicators, we are going to introduce the non-financial performance indicators to an organization. non-financial performance indicators කොහොමද apply වෙන්නේ කියන එක මේ context එකේ. And then the non-financial performance indicators is also having certain limitation. So we are going to even discuss what those issues are. So that's about the today's discussion overview. ඒ දේවල් ටික තමයි අපි අද කතා කරන්නේ. Right? Okay. So having said that, let me come to a kind of introduction. The organizations evaluate the performance and identify strategies to improve the quality of planning and control decisions. So the organization evaluate performance and identify strategies to improve the quality of planning and control decisions. So as I told you, when it comes to this performance evaluation, so why you do a kind of performance evaluation? Because you need to ensure to what extent that you are successful in achieving the objectives of an organization. To what extent that you are successful in achieving the vision and mission of an organization. So therefore, this performance evaluation will give you a kind of idea. So are you in the correct path? So if you find that you are not in the correct path, that will help you to develop certain strategies and then ensure that you are going to achieve the end result, right? So that is the very essence of performance measurement. So අපි දන්නවතාවල performance measurement කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි ආයතනයක් ගත්තාම ඒ ආයතනයේ vision එකක්, mission එකක්, objectives තියෙනවා. ඒතර ඒ දේවල් අපි කොච්චර දුරට achieve කරනවද කියන එක තමයි මේ performance evaluate කිරීම තුළින් අපිට තීරණය කරන්න පුළුවන්. දැන් සරල උදාහරණයක් ගත්තොත් ආයතනයක තියෙන්න පුළුවන් profit maximization කියන target එක. So it's very common for a private sector organization to have such kind of objective, right? Then how do you ensure that you're maximizing the profit? So කොහොමද ඔයා ensure කරන්නේ ඔයා profit maximize කරනවා කියන්නේ? In order to do that, maybe on a quarterly basis or maybe on a yearly basis, you might need to look at the profitability indicators, the profitability related financial performance indicators. Maybe the net profit margin, the gross profit margin, the return on capital employed, likewise. So අපි ගත්තොත් සරලවම ආයතනයකට තියෙන ඔබ්ජෙක්ටිව් එකක් කියලා profit maximize කරන එක. එතකොට ඒ ආයතනයට පුළුවන් සමහර විට වාර්ෂික පදනමකට එහෙම නැත්නම් කාර්තුමය පදනමකට යම් යම් profit target set කරගන්න. So අපි හිතමු annually අපිට profit target එකක් තියෙනවා return on capital employed අපිට ඕනේ 15% achieve කරන්න. right? එතකොට අපි ඒ target එක තියාගෙන අපිට බලන්න පුළුවන් වර්ෂයක් ඉවර වුණාට පස්සේ අපි ඇත්තම return on capital employed කීයද? අපි හිතමු මේක 10% වුණා කියලා. So now you can see that we are well behind the target. අපි 115ක් target කරා. හැබැයි අපි achieve කරගත්තේ 110යි. එහෙනම් අපිට පේනවා එතන adverse variance එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒකට එහෙමනම් අපි ඒකට strategies formulate කරන්න ඕන. ඒකට අපි බලන්න ඕනේ ඊළඟ අවුරුද්දේ මේක recover කරගන්න අපි strategies හදලා අපිට පුළුවන් අපේ අලුත් product launch කරන එකක් ගැන හිතන්න. නැත්නම් අපිට පුළුවන් තියෙන products different markets වලට අරගෙන යන්න, right? So you know that there are different strategies. You can expand your market, or you can introduce new products to the market. So like this, by trying out different strategies, you can ensure that at the end of the day that you are going to be profitable. ඔයයි profit targets ටික achieve කරනවා කියන එක ඔයාට ensure කරන්න පුළුවන්. Right? It's about the what you call the performance measurement. It's simple as that. ඒකට ඒක ඒ වගේ සරල කාරණාවක්. So if I'm just to take kind of Excel sheet, so just to summarize what I was telling you, right? So in the meantime, to answer some of your questions, you're asking that whether we need to take the vaccination, right? In fact, that I'm not aware of that, Puta, actually. So I do not know what the government is going to do about that. So sometimes they might plan to give the vaccine for the university students, but still not aware. Even in the being in the Colombo district, so still we have not got the vaccine. So still the vaccine is directed for the high risk categories. Even when it comes to the areas where they have recorded the higher number of cases, they are the ones who are getting the priority. Still, even we are not getting that vaccine. So therefore, I don't have such kind of idea. And when it comes to universities, yes, there's a discussion going on, most probably by towards the end of the April, yes. So they may start or reopen the universities. Right, good. Okay, so if I'm to just summarize what I was telling, that you know when it comes to an organization, so they have this vision mission. So it is at a very higher scale, no? The vision mission of an organization. So this is your basic management, right? Then the vision and mission. Then it cascades down to the objectives, no? So you have some strategic objectives. So that's how it works, right? And when it comes to these strategic objectives, you need to ensure that at the end of a particular period, maybe within 5 years time, or maybe within 3 years time, these objectives are being achieved. So ඔයාට අවශ්‍යයි මේ objectives යම් නිශ්චිත කාල රාමුවක් තුළ achieve වෙනවා කියන එක තහවුරු කරගන්න. එතකොට එහෙම කරන්න නම්, so you need to have a kind of a well-defined mechanism. And what is that mechanism? That is the performance measurement. That is what we call the performance measurement. ඒක තමයි අපි performance measurement කියන්නේ. අපි හිතමු strategic plans අපි set කරේ අවුරුදු 3කට කියලා, objectives අපි set කරේ අවුරුදු 3කට කියලා. එහෙනම් මේ අවුරුදු 3 තුල අපි බලන්න ඕනේ year on year progress එක. දැන් අපි හිතමු ආයතනයක් තියෙනවා. And recently I have done one of my research study in demo PLC. So while I was doing that research study, I was exposed to their vision and the mission, or what they call it, the purpose. What they call it, the purpose. What is their purpose? They are saying that they want to create value responsibly. That's their purpose. Value responsibly. So demo කියන ආයතනය අපි ගත්තොත් එයාලගේ vision එක mission එක එහෙම නැත්නම් purpose එක තමයි responsible විදිහට value එකක් create කරන එක. Profits make කරන්න ඕනේ කොහොමද responsible විදිහට. Create value responsibly. ඊට පස්සේ එයාලා ඒක cascade down කරනවා strategic objectives වලට. මොනවද? They have strategic objectives like say create value for shareholders. It's very obvious, no? So one of the objectives is to create value for shareholders, right? It cascading down from this vision, mission, or the purpose, create value for shareholders. Then on the same time, they do identify another strategic objective. What is that? That is to create value for stakeholders. So one is about the shareholders, the other one is about stakeholders. And at the same time, they identify another and they call that they want to be a responsible citizen. So these are their strategic objectives. එතකොට යාළගේ vision එක එහෙම නැත්නම් purpose එක තියෙනවා responsible විදියට value එක create කරන්න ඕනේ කියන එක. ඒක මත පදනම් වෙලා යාළ strategic objectives අඳුරගෙන තියෙනවා මේ විදියට. ඒතර මේ stakeholders ලා කිව්වහම මේක යටතට එනවා customers ලා ඉන්නවා. They want to create value for customers, right? They want to create value for customers and they want to create value for employees. යාළගේ employees ලා ඉන්නවා, right? And they want to create value for business partners line now, right? Partners. So likewise there are different parties, right? The different impactful shareholders are there, and here they have the investors or the owners. Shareholders, they are the owners. And when it comes to being responsible citizens, they do care about the community at large. They care about the environment and the community at large. They care about the community, the environment. Yeah, that's about being a responsible citizen. So this is their strategic objectives. Then the question is that, then how do they ensure that whether they are achieving these strategic objectives or whether they are achieving, whether they are pursuing the very purpose of that organization. So whether they are in the right direction. So that is what they need to ensure. Then how can they ensure that? That is through the performance measurement. So the answer is the performance measurement. So in order to ensure that they are having different performance indicators. For example, when it comes to create value for shareholders, they are looking at ROC, return on capital employed. Then at the same time, they may be looking at the net profit margin. Another ratio what they are interested in. Even the gross profit margin. So that is their basic what we call the performance indicators. So these are financial performance indicators. And then they have certain targets. Say their target is 15% on a per annum or annual basis. This is their target, right? The net profit margin, yeah, they say that 12% net profit margin. So these are their targets. Then once a particular year is over, they can compare this with the actual. Then they can decide to what extent that they are successful in achieving this objective. Say that they managed to achieve 16%. So they are quite well in terms of return on capital employed. So their shareholders are really happy with the performance. Even the net profit margin, sometimes it can be say 11%. It's a reasonable number, but it's still it is just below the target, but still they're at a very satisfactory level. So that is the practical way of doing. And when it comes to this creative value for stakeholders, so most of the time you may not be able to depend on the financial performance indicators, but most of the time you may be using non-financial performance indicators, so which we'll be discussing later. But at the moment, just to complete the story, I might make use of some, say, the customer satisfaction index, right? They are having the customer satisfaction index, right? It's a non-financial performance indicator, customer, right? It's customer satisfaction index. So they need to maintain a particular one target. They are having a very high target on that because the customers are the key. So they might need to achieve a customer satisfaction of 90%. And similarly, when it comes to the employees, so they may be looking at employee engagement score, right? Employee engagement is score. So it tells to what extent that they are engaging with the employees. So it may be giving marks out of, as I saw, it's mark out of 4, the maximum. So they are having a target of 3.7. So that is the score. So these are targets, right? And similarly, when it comes to the responsible citizen, especially when it comes to the environment, they are looking at the carbon emission. The carbon emission is one of their targets, the CO2, carbon emission. So they need to maintain them at a particular level. And when it comes to the community, they are looking at the community investment. So this is what we call the CSR projects, right? Community investments. So it is simple as that. So you have the vision, mission, and the purpose, and then you have the strategic objectives. Depending on this vision, mission, it cascades down to this what you call the objectives, and then how we are going to achieve these objectives, that is through the performance measurement system. So any organization, if you take any organization, there they have the performance measurement system. Even if you take the university, they have this performance measurement system. So if you take any well-established organization, so they are definitely having this performance measurement. So therefore, it's a pretty much important concept, the performance measurement. So that is what ensure that how successful you are in achieving the objectives. ඕනෑම ආයතනයක, right? මේ performance measurement කියන එක තියෙනවා. ඒතර යාලා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම තමන් කොච්චර successfulද මේ objectives achieve කිරීම තුළ කියන එක තහවුරු කරගන්නේ මේ performance measurement එක හරහා. ඒක ඇත්තටම අපේ ජීවිතවලත් දැනුවත් වුණ දැනුවත්ව අපි ගාව යම් යම් targets තියෙනවානේ. ඒතර අපි මේ targets වලට වැඩ කරනවා. දැන් උදාහරණයක් විදිහට so if you take the university life, so when you work in the university, you are having a particular target for the semester. So let's say that your objective, the end objective is to go for a first class degree. So that is your purpose, or maybe the strategic objective to go for a first class. So if you are to plan to go for a first class degree, then on the semester wise, you are going to do planning. So from the very first semester onwards, you may be having a particular target for A. So one target is for A. You need to maintain certain A's. Let's say that per semester, If you maintain 3, so it's going to help, right? It's a target. So අපිට semester එකේ තියාගන්න පුළුවන් නම් ACE 3ක් වගේ, that's good. And also when it comes to the GPA, so you need to maintain that as well. Also you may try to maintain that at a kind of a reasonable level, right? So if you do that, and then at the end of the day you may be ended up achieving your target, right? So ඒ විදිහට knowingly or unknowingly, even in our life, so we are having this performance measurement. So we do have targets and we measure ourselves against these targets. And how do we say that we are successful? That purely based on to what extent that we are achieving our targets. අපි targets අපි කොච්චර දුරකට achieve කරනවද කියන එකත් එක්ක තමයි අපි අපේ success එක නැත්නම් failure එක ගැන අපි කතා කරන්නේ. Right? So therefore it's a very practical area, and also it's a very important area. At the same time, it's a very important area, right? So this is our basic discussion. Are you clear with that? So if you have any question, so then and there, make sure to ask them, right? Okay, good. Thank you. So let's move on. So when it comes to the topic, basically in the first part, we are going to looking at the financial performance indicators. Now you know that when it comes to the performance measurement, basically there are financial as well as non-financial performance indicators. So in the first part of the today's discussion, we are going to looking at or concentrate on the financial performance indicators, and then come to the non-financial performance indicators. Okay. The financial statement analysis is a method of reviewing and analyzing the company's financial statement in order to measure its past, present, and projected future performance. So therefore, when it comes to this performance measurement, a good starting point to measure your performance, it may be the present or the past, even the future performance, good starting point is going to be your financial statements. Because your financial statements would help to work out different kinds of performance indicators. So if you take this financial statement, it would help you to basically work out some profitability ratios. So you know the profitability is one of the main areas, the profitability. So the profitability ratios can be worked out using the financial statement, like the net profit margin, the gross profit margin, the return on capital employed. These are profitability ratios. And even it would help you to look at the liquidity position. Liquidity. Like the current ratio, the quick ratio. So it's about the short-term liquidity. So when it comes to long-term liquidity, you can look at the ratios like debt to equity ratio, right? And the interest cover, that is also something to do with the liquidity. And also at the same time, you may be looking at other aspects as well. So we are going to discuss that. Even the risk related measures are there. So if you take the ratios like especially the investor based ratios, so it will be looking at the risk dimension. So we are going to discuss them. So in very soon we are going to discuss them in detail. But just to make you aware that when it comes to this financial statement, it's a good starting point for us to do the performance measurement. So it helps us to have or to calculate different financial performance indicators. පෙරුතලා මේ performance measurement වලට ආවහම අපිට මේ financial statements ගොඩක් වැදගත් වෙනවා. මොකද මේ financial statements මත පදනම් වෙලා අපිට පුළුවන් විවිධ ratios calculate කරගන්න. එහෙනම් අපි ratios වලට කියනවා financial performance indicators කියලා. අපි දන්නවා profitability ratios තියෙනවා, එතනින් ගියාම liquidity related ratios, the risk related ratios, likewise different ratios can be there, right? So therefore the financial statement is a good starting point. The main purpose of financial statement analysis is to utilize information about the past performance of the company in order to predict how it will fare in the future. So the very purpose is of this financial statement analysis is to focus on your past performance, so you can look at how well that you have performed in the past. If you compare that against the targets, you can say that to what extent that you are doing good or bad. So depending on that, then you can plan your future. You can predict the future. So once you set the targets, so once you get the actual result or the past performance, then you can compare them, and then you can say how good you are. And depending on that, you would be able to predict the future, or even you can say that you would be able to plan for the future. එතකොට මේ financial statement analysis එකේ තියෙන ප්‍රධාන වාසිය තමයි එකකින් අපිට බලන්න පුළුවන් අපේ past performance එක කොහොමද කියන එක, අපි කොහොමද අතීතේ perform කරලා තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට ඒක මත පදනම් වෙලා අපිට අනාගතේ plan කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතර අපිට පේනවා නම් අපේ targets අපි achieve කරලා නැත්තම්, අපේ performance එක actual performance එක හොඳ නැත්තම් plan කරපු මට්ටමට අපිට පුළුවන් plan කරන්න අනාගතයේදී කොහොමද අපි මේ targets achieve කරන්නේ කියන කාරණා. So therefore the financial statement analysis is helpful. When it comes to this financial statement analysis, the financial analysis, there are different kinds. There are different kinds of analysis. Even some of them you are even done in your A levels, right? A levels වලටත් කරලා තියෙනවා. The ratio analysis එකක් වගේ දෙයක් ඔයාලා ඉගෙනගෙන තියෙනවානේ. And even you might have heard about this common size, or what we call the vertical analysis, and even the horizontal, or what we call the trend analysis. So these are different kinds of financial analysis. But here, when it comes to performance measurement, which would be of a greater benefit, and that's going to be the ratio analysis. The ratio analysis would help more when it comes to the performance measurement. The performance measurements කියන context එකේ අපි කතා කරනකොට ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් අපිට ratio analysis එක ගොඩක්ම ප්‍රයෝජනවත් වෙනවා compared to the common size analysis or the horizontal analysis. But still, these are different techniques that is available to measure the performance. Let's take one by one and see what each of these analyses are. Starting from the common size or the vertical analysis. Let's see what it is. So when it comes to this vertical analysis or the common size analysis, what you're going to do is you're going to remove the size impact. So if you take, for example, if you take two entities, you know, entities are of different size. So for an example, if you take the John Keel's holdings, so it is the biggest conglomerate, right? It's the biggest conglomerate in Sri Lanka. So in one hand, you take the JKH. On the other hand, you may be taking a kind of a very simple organization. Say that maybe Demo, the Demo PLC, or maybe a kind of a plantation company, right? So likewise, a kind of a very small scale organization. Then can you necessarily compare these two organizations which are of different size? So අපිට පේනවා දැන් JKH කියන්නේ ලංකාවේ තියෙන biggest conglomerate business එක. ඒකට ලොකුම ආයතනයක්. ඒකට අපි අනිත් පැත්තෙන් ගත්තොත් Demo වගේ, එතකොට ඒක ගොඩක් comparatively කුඩා ආයතනයක්. ඒකට අපිට මේ ආයතන දෙක compare කරන්න බෑ because of the size problem, right? Then in this common size analysis, what we are going to do, we are going to eliminate this size impact. We are going to bring them to a common ground. May size vertical analysis එකේදී නැත්නම් common size analysis එකේදී අපි මොකක්ද කරන්නේ මේ size impact එක ඉවත් කරගන්න. Then how we are going to do that? It is pretty much simple. What you are going to do, you are going to express the assets and even the equity and the liability of the statement of financial position, taking it as a percentage of the total asset. So you are taking the total asset as the basis, then you express the individual asset, the non-current asset as well as the current asset as a percentage of the total asset. So that's what you do. එතකොට මෙතන පුතාලා common size analysis එකේදී අපි මොකක්ද කරන්නේ? අපිට පේන ආයතන දෙකක් different size එකේ නම් එක compare කරන්න බෑ necessarily. එතකොට ඒ වගේ වෙලාවක අපිට පුළුවන් මේ size impact එක අයින් කරන්න. එතකොට අපි ආයතන වල scale එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ. අපි කරන්නේ මොකක්ද? total asset base එක විදිහට අරගෙන අපිට පුළුවන් statement of financial position එක නැවත derive කරන්න percentage විදිහට. එතකොට PP කොච්චර percentage එකක්ද? inventory කොච්චර percentage එකක්ද? debtors ලා කොච්චරක්ද? මේ වගේ අපිට ඒක percentage wise බලන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට ඒ විදිහටම අපි අනිත් කම්පැනි එකෙත් කරොත් අපි JKH එකෙත් කරොත් ඒ විදිහටම එතකොට අපිට පේනවා now these financial statements are in a more comparable basis. So it is now in a kind of a comparative basis. So you can compare and see which organization is doing better, which organization is doing better. So therefore, this helps the intercompany, what you call the comparison. So which take the size impact out. So you can do the same for the statement of profit or loss or the statement of financial performance. You can take this time the sales revenue as the what do you call that, the basis. You can take the sales revenue as the basis, and then you can express the rest of the figures, the cost of sales, the gross profit, the other income, to the different kinds of expenses as a percentage of the sales revenue. So that is the statement of financial performance. So you have simply converted the basic statement of financial position and the statement of financial performance to a kind of a financial statement that is expressed as a percentage of total asset and as a percentage of sales revenue respectively. Right? तर මේ වගේ දෙයක් තමයි common size analysis එකදී සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඒකත් ගොඩක් වැදගත් වෙනවා. එතකොට size impact එක ඉවත් කරලා යම් කිසි ආයතන දෙකක් compare කරන්න ඕන නම් ඒතර අපිට common size එක ගැන common size analysis එකක් ගැන හිතන්න පුළුවන්. Similarly, when it comes to the horizontal analysis, or what we call the trend analysis, and that is what we do in order to evaluate the trend. So maybe the trend in the sales revenue, the trend in profit, and the trend in PP, the non-current asset. So these are some of the information that you may be interested in. So as an investor or as the managers of an organization, you may be particularly interested in certain trends. ඒතර ආයතනයක් ගත්තාම ඒතර යම් trends තියෙනවා අපි ඒව සම්බන්ධයෙන් වඩා වැඩි උනන්දුවක් දක්වනවා. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට අපි දකින්න කැමති අපේ sales trend එක මොන වගේද කියන එක. right? ඒතකොට එතනින් ගියාම අපි කැමති දකින්න අපේ PP වල trend එක මොකක්ද? අවුරුදු ගානක් තිස්සේ ඒක වැඩි වෙනවද අඩු වෙනවද? ඒතකොට profit එකේ trend එක කොහොමද? ඒතර මේ වගේ trend එකක් අපි බලන්න ආසයි over the years how it has changed කියන එක. So the trend analysis evaluate an organization's financial information over a period of time. Most of the time, when you take a particular organization, so you would be interested in looking at the trend over a period of 10 years or even over a period of 5 years. Likewise, you may be interested in looking at. So that is about the trend analysis, the trend in sales, the trend in PP, and also the profit, as I mentioned. The periods may be measured in months, quarters, or even years, depending on the circumstance. So you can look at a monthly trend, you can look at a quarterly trend, or even you can look at the yearly trend. Even if you take the Colombo Stock Exchange, even they may be looking at trend even on a daily basis. So you might see that if you access the CSE, so you can see the trend in the share prices of a particular company. If you take a particular company, even you can go up to the daily basis, how this particular trend has evolved or how it has changed. Right? ඒතකොට මේ වගේ දේවල් ටිකක් තමයි අපි trend එකෙන් බලන්නේ. So therefore, the trend analysis is particularly helpful for an organization to see how the things has changed over time. Is it an increasing trend, or is it a decreasing trend, or is it simply remain constant? So that's what you are interested in looking at. So these are the two techniques, the alternative techniques that is available for this analysis. So then we come to the most important one, or our focus when it comes to this, the financial performance indicators, that is about the ratios. So in fact, when it comes to these ratios, this is a very familiar topic. So since you are A levels, so even in your A levels, you would have worked out certain ratios relating to the profitability, the liquidity, and even the efficiency. So likewise, you could have worked out certain ratios. So here, what we are going to looking at the interpretation, or how to interpret a particular ratio and how to use a particular ratio for the purpose of performance measurement. පුතාලා අපි මේ chapter එකේදී ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ ratios සම්බන්ධයෙන් ratio compute කරන එක කතා කරන්න නෙමෙයි, ඒක ඔයාලා දන්නවා. නමුත් අපි ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් රිවයිස් කරනවා. අපි ඒක රිවයිස් කරනවා, ඒක රිවිෂන් එකක් කරනවා. මොනවද මේ ratios කියන එක. නමුත් අපි ඒකින් depth කතා කරන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. මොකද ඔයාලා දැනටමත් මේ දේවල් ඉගෙනගෙන තියෙනවා. නමුත් මේ පාඩමෙන්දී අපි බලන්නේ basically performance measurement සඳහා, ආයතනයක performance measurement සඳහා කොහොමද මේ ratios අපි භාවිතා කරන්නේ. සහ මේ වගේ interpretations කොහොමද, how to interpret these ratios. So that is our prime focus, right? One of the most frequently used yardstick in evaluating the efficiency and the performance of a business is ratio analysis. The ratio analysis is an attempt to derive measures or guide concerning the financial health and profitability of a business enterprise. So you are looking at the financial position and also the profitability. So the profitability and the financial position. The value of ratio analysis is that it enables a financial analyst to evaluate the past performance, assess the current financial position of the company, and gain insight useful for projecting future results. So it's all about looking at the past performance. So you can see how good you have performed in relation to a particular period. So you may be having certain targets, and then you can assess. So if you work out certain ratios based on this financial performance, you can see to what extent that you have achieved that, right? So that is what even we have discussed, right? You have certain targets, maybe the ROC, the net profit margin, and then you can see how good you are doing. And that's what this ratio helps you with. A ratio analysis is an analysis of information contained in a company's financial statements. It's very true. When it comes to this ratio analysis, basically you are make use of two statements prominently. The one is the statement of financial performance. We call it the profit or loss. The other one is the statement of financial position. Statement of financial position. So these are the two statements what you make use of the most. The ratio itself is not the answer, but is an indicator of some aspect of a company's performance. The ratio itself is not going to help you. So these ratios must necessarily be compared, right? එතකොට ratio calculate කිරීම තුල පමණක් කිසිම meaningful දෙයක් අපිට කරන්න බෑ නේ. මොන හරි ආයතනයකට අදාළව financial statements available නම් අපිට ගිහිල්ලා විවිධ ratios calculate කරන්න පුළුවන්. අපිට පුළුවන් profitability ratios calculate කරන්න, liquidity related දේවල් calculate කරන්න. නමුත් එතනින් කිසිම අපිට meaningful දෙයක් එන්නේ නැහැ. අපි ratio එකක් calculate කරා කියලා it doesn't give you any meaningful context. So therefore, in order to make some sense out of these ratios, you need to have some targets. ඒකට ඔයාට මොනවා හරි targets නැත්නම් benchmark එකක් තියෙනවා. Right? So it may be a kind of a target that you set. So like you have witnessed, right? ඔයා එතකොට කලින් witness කරා වගේ යම්කිසි target එකක් ඔයාට තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. So then you can compare them against that and then you can say something about that. Or even you may be looking intercompany scenario, right? You may be comparing the situation of two companies. So එක්කෝ යාට companies දෙකක් දෙන්න ඕනේ. එකක් ABC, XYZ. So ඒ වගේ එකම industry එකේ ඉන්න companies දෙකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒකට අනුව අපිට යම් යම් figures දෙනවා. සමහරට ROC figure එක වෙන්න පුළුවන්, right? It's 12% and it's 15%. It's 10% and it's 7%. So likewise, විවිධ ratios දෙනවා ආයතන දෙකකට අදාළ. ඒතකොට එතනදී අන්න ඔයාට meaningful context එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතකොට එතන compare කරලා ඔයාට මොකක්ද හොඳ කියන එක කියන්න පුළුවන්. So you can compare them and say what is best. So who is performing better, right? So whether you are performing better. So likewise, you can make some meaningful thing. So that's why it says that the ratio itself is not the answer, but it's an indicator of some aspect of a company's performance. So you must make some meaningful thing out of that. The key aspect of the performance measurement is ratio analysis. So therefore, when you come to this performance measurement, you may be predominantly using some financial performance indicators or what we call the ratios. The ratio analysis involves construction of a ratios using specific element from the financial statement in ways that help identify the strengths and weaknesses of the firm. So this ratio analysis, it's a kind of a meaningful relationship between two variables most of the time. So for example, if you take the net profit margin, it's a relationship between the net profit or the profit and the sales. So therefore, it's a relationship between the two items. So it involves the construction of ratios using specific elements from the financial statement in ways that help identify the strengths and weakness of the firm. So these ratios will eventually help you to identify your strengths and weaknesses. So if you find that your profitability ratios are better than you plan, better than the targets, then you know you are quite strong in terms of profitability. So similarly, if you find that you are not doing well when it comes to this, what you call the liquidity aspect, so then it's a weakness. So you are not doing better than you expected. So you are strong in terms of profitability, but at the same time, you may be weak in terms of the liquidity. So likewise, the ratio would help to identify your strengths and weaknesses. And as I mentioned, when it comes to these ratios, there are different classifications. You might find that different classification, even you would have learned different classification. But here in this course, depending on our purpose is about the performance measurement. So usually when it comes to this performance measurement, basically we divide the ratios into three categories: the profitability related ratios, the profitability related financial performance indicators, liquidity related performance indicators, the financial performance indicators, and risk related financial performance indicators. Likewise, right? From this point onwards, what we are going to do, we are going to looking at each of these ratios separately. අපි දැන් ඊළඟට කරන්නේ මේ එක් ratios එක් category එක අරගෙන ඒ යට තියෙන වැදගත් ratios කිහිපයක් බලාගෙන යන එක තමයි පුතාලා අපි ඊළඟට කරන්නේ. So before we moving on, I would like to ask, do you have any questions, or do you have anything to add, or do you have any comments or anything? So I just want to measure the performance so far, depending on what I have accomplished, and check that with your expectation and see whether there are any deviation. බලන්න පුතාලා මේ දක්වා කතා කරපු දේවල් පැහැදිලිද? නැත්නම් මේකට මොනවද තව ඇඩ් වෙන්න ඕනද? අපි කතා කරපු වේගය වැඩිද? Likewise, so would like to receive a kind of feedback. Okay. Your understanding so far good. Thank you. Your understanding so far. Right. Then let us continue to the discussion of the ratios. It's starting from profitability aspect. Usually, when it comes to this profitability, we are predominantly using four ratios. So one of the important ratios that the business organizations are worrying about is the gross profit margin, because it is particularly important. So this gross profit margin would eventually decide whether you are going to make a profit or not. So you need to have a kind of a significant gross profit margin in order to cover up all your operating expenses. And then only you would be able to make it to a net profit, right? Hence, the organizations are really keen on the gross profit margin. Similarly, when it comes to this net profit margin, that is also the bottom line. The organization are really keen on that. So at the end of the day, you would love to see your organization is making profits. So even the investors would love to see that you are making some good profits, right? So the net profit margin, so there you are looking at how good you are in converting the sales to profit. So මෙතන පුතාලා basically අපි බලන්නේ sales සහ profit එක අතර තියෙන relationship එක. එහෙමනම් අපි බලනවා මේකෙන් අපි කොච්චර හොඳයිද මේ sales profit එකට convert කිරීමේ. So how good we are in converting the sales into profit, or how efficient we are in converting the sales into profit. So that's what we are looking at, the net profit margin. And then we have, so before that, let me take this asset turnover. So if you take this asset turnover, it is indeed it is relating to the profitability, but it's a kind of a ratio basically looking at the efficiency, right? Your efficiency. So when it comes to this asset turnover, usually we are calculating that. There are different ways of calculating, but one of the more sensible way of calculating this could be the sales divided by the capital employed. For the capital that you have employed, what is the sales? So therefore, it is basically looking at the relationship between inputs and output. So what is the input in this ratio? I'm talking about this asset turnover. What is the input that they are looking at? So if you take this, what is that? Asset turnover. If you take this asset turnover, so What you are looking at, as I told you, it's about the sales divided by the capital employed. Right? So in some cases, you might find that you are taking the asset. So that's why I told you that there are different ways of calculating that. But here there is a pretty meaningful context. Why am I taking this capital employed? Later you may realize that. But at the moment, if I'm just to tell you, when it comes to this capital employed, basically, when it comes to the asset, most of the time you acquire the asset or you finance this asset using the money that you raised from the issue of shares, basically the equity capital as well as the debt capital. So therefore, effectively, how do you acquire this asset is going to be through the capital that you have raised. So that's one of the main argument why we should take the capital employed. අපි ආයතනයේ තියෙන asset acquire කරන්න කියපුවම especially the non current asset අපි දන්නවා ඒවා ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් අපි acquire කරගන්නේ අපි raise කරන funds එක. ඒකට අපි funds raise කරන්න අපිට පුළුවන් debt එක විදියට raise කරන්න. ඒ වගේම අපිට පුළුවන් equity විදියට මේ funds raise කරන්න. ඒකට මේ විදියට raise කරන funds වලින් තමයි අපි assets acquire කරන්නේ. ඒ නිසා අපිට මේකට more meaningful විදියට capital employed ගන්න පුළුවන්. So what I was trying to say here is that when it comes to this capital employed, it is what our input. So that is the input of the organization. And sales, that is the output. So therefore, this asset turnover is a ratio that looking at the efficiency. Why is that? Efficiency is all about the minimum input, maximum output. So here it is the output. Here we have the input. So it is a efficient. It looks at the efficiency. And similarly, if I take this net profit, that is also a profitability measure. Basically, it looks at how good you are in converting that to a profit. So you can get this, the net profit, even the operating profit can be taken. So depending on the circumstance, divide by sales. That is your net profit margin, right? So how good you are in converting this sales to profit. Then you have this return on capital employed. I asked you to keep it for a while because I just want to show you something interesting. When it comes to this return on capital employed, usually we calculate it as the net profit. Even sometimes we take the operating profit, but even no harm if you take the net profit divided by capital employed. Right? එතකොට මේක අපිට operating profit එක ගන්නත් පුළුවන්. net profit ගත්ත කියලා හානියකුත් නැහැ. ඔයා consistent වෙන්න විතරයි අවශ්‍ය. So all what is need, you need to be consistent. So I use කරන එක consistent විදියට use කිරීම විතරයි වෙන්න ඕනේ. Right? So let's say that you are using the net profit. That's fine. Then you can see that here comes the return on capital employed. Then I will claim that this return on capital employed is a kind of a measure that we derive based on the asset turnover and the net profit. Or we call it, it's a matter of profitability. It's a matter of profitability and the efficiency. Right? So once you get this efficiency multiplied by, the profitability, there it comes the return on capital employed. මේ return on capital employed කියන එක ඇත්තටම එන්නේ මේ efficiency සහ profitability එකේ function එකක් විදිහට. එතකොට ඔය efficiency එක profitability එකේ multiply කරොත් ඔයාට return on capital employed එයි. Let's try that. Asset turnover, sales, there you have the capital employed. Right? And the profitability, you have the net profit, divided by the sales. right? ඔය විදිහට තමයි එන්නේ නේ. So you have the net profit. This is it. And if you look at this, so if you apply this cross multiplication, you would find that the sales and sales, it goes, and what is left, it is net profit divided by capital employed. You can see that eventually what is left, it is net profit divided by capital employed. So this is the most important relationship that you need to see. So this return on capital employed is a measure of efficiency and profitability. So in some instances, you may find that the entity is not doing better in terms of profitability, but still they are having a high return on capital employed. Then you know what is the reason for that? Because that entity is, though it is not profitable, it may be very efficient. If you are very efficient, even if you are not good in terms of profitability, you can go for a higher return on capital employed. तर මේ රිලේෂන්ෂිප් එකේ තියෙන වැදගත්කම තමයි පුතාලා ඔයාට පේන්න පුළුවන් සමහර ආයතන තියෙනවා return on capital employed හොඳයි හොඳටම හොඳයි they are doing good නමුත් එයාලගේ profitability එක අඩුයි. ඒතර profitability එක අඩු වෙලා කොහොමද එයාලා හොඳ return on capital employed වලට ගියේ? It's because of the efficiency. Even it can be other way around. ඔයා හොඳ නැහැ, you are not efficient. Right? When you come to this input-output relationship, you are not good at converting the assets or the capital to the sales. But still, you are doing well in terms of profitability. නමුත් ඔයාගේ profitability එක ගොඩක් හොඳයි. So එහෙමනම් ඔයාට ඒත් ROC වලට යන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතර මේ දෙකම හොඳයි නම් you can go for a good a better one, but the practical point is that it's not going to work in that way. So the one component may be superior. So either the efficiency or profitability. So if I'm to explain you in very simple terms, so think about an organization that who is selling the products at a very thin margin. අපි හිතමු ආයතනයක් තියෙනවා බොහොම අඩු ලාභයක් තියාගෙන තමයි විකුණන්නේ. ඒක බොහොම අඩු ලාභයක් තියාගෙන විකුණනවා නම් their sales price is quite less, so therefore they would be having significant number of sales unit. So ලාභය අඩු නම් ගොඩක් වෙලාවට මේ product එක වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයකට විකිනෙනවා. ලාභය අඩුයි කියන්නේ විකුණුම් මිල අඩුයි. විකුණුම් මිල අඩුයි කියන්නේ විකුණන ඒකක ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි. ඒ කියන්නේ sales වැඩි. එතකොට යොදලා තියෙන ප්‍රාග්ධනයට සාපේක්ෂව sales වැඩි කියන්නේ එයා efficient. හැබැයි එයාගේ profit එක thin margin එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒතර එයාගේ profitability එක අඩුයි. ඒතකොට ඒක practical point එකකින් ගත්තාම අපිට පේනවා මේ දෙක අතර trade off එකක් තියෙනවා. සා බොහොම විරල අවස්ථාවක් efficiency and the profitability both are good, but most of the time you might find a particular aspect may be better compared to the other. ඒ වගේම තමයි සමහර ආයතන තියෙනවා එයාලගේ profit එක margin එක හොඳටම වැඩි නිසා එයා විකුණන ඒක ගාණ අඩුයි. So if you think about very luxurious products, so if you think about the BMW, if you think about the Apple iPhone, maybe the 12 or whatever that, so they are having a significant profit. But if you look at the number of units that they sell, it's very less. So therefore the sales is less, but the profit is high. So they are good in terms of profitability, but not in terms of efficiency. So therefore, again, the trade-off is there, right? Good. Okay. You're having certain questions. Yes. Now let me look at that. Yes. Let me come to your question. What does it mean by turnover? Is it the turnover means sales. Turnover can sales. Good. It is shown as net profit divided by capital employed. Is it okay? Yes. So that's why I told you when you come to this return on capital employed, you can take the operating profit divided by capital employed. That is one way of calculating that. So if you are to take net profit divided by capital employed, no problem. That is even okay. So the only thing what I stressed or what I emphasize is that you need to be consistent. So in one place you may be using operating profit, in another you are using the net profit. No, that should not be the case. So whatever the basis that you are using, use it consistently. ඒක තමයි පුතා බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. None of these things are perfect. None of these things are precise. ඒතර මේ කිසිම දෙයක් perfect උත් නැහැ. කිසිම දෙයක් precise උත් නැහැ. සා ඔයාට පුළුවන් ඒ subjectivity එක තියෙනවා. ඔයාට පුළුවන් යම්කිසි profit measure එකක් තෝරගන්න. ඒතර ඒ තෝරගන්නකොට හැබැයි ඒක consistently use කරන්න. In the manual, it is net profit divided by capital employed. Is net profit equal to sales? No. Net profit means without profit. You mean that net profit divided by capital employed, that is simply the asset turnover, right? Asset turnover එක නේද? Net profit margin එක ගැනද පුතාලා කියන්නේ? Net profit margin net profit divided by sales වෙන්න ඕනේ. Asset turnover, right? Asset turnover, yes. Asset turnover, yes. Sales divided by. Am I missing the point? What I have written over here is the correct one. So referring to that, you can make the correction. Turnover කියන්නේ sales වලට turnover එක කියලා අපි කියනවා. Asset turnover එක අපි ගන්න මේ විදිහට තමයි උතා. මේ ලියලා තියෙන විදිය. එන manual එකේ මම හිතන්නේ වැරදි. එන mistake එකක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. So you may refer to that and yeah, understand that mistake, right? And yes, net profit meaning after deducting tax, yes. Whether asset turnover equal net profit divided by capital employed, yes. Where the capital employed, what is the formula? The capital employed is simply the debt capital, that is the long-term capital, long-term or what we call the non-current liabilities plus the equity. Non-current liabilities plus equity. Does net profit means after? Yes. Yeah. So I think now I have answered most of the questions. And so do we tested on aspects common size financial and trade analysis in the course? No, Buddha. Here our focus is on the performance measurement. Hence, what matter to you? It's about the ratio analysis. That is what matter to you the most. But still, we thought of discussing the rest of the things. Just wanted to show that there are even other techniques. So that was the very purpose of discussing the common size as well as the horizontal and the vertical one, right? So, but our prime focus is on the ratio analysis. Good. Okay, I think now I have answered. Do we need to remember this equation or are they given next? No, Gota. Most of the time, you may not need to use more almost all these ratios. So in a given question, sometimes we may ask you to work out some profitability related ratios. So in that point, you may have to develop one or two suitable ones. So in the exam, I cannot say that for sure. I can say that it is not going to be given separately. ඒක වෙනම පුතාලට කොහොමත්ම දෙන්නේ නැති වෙයි formulas කියන එක. ඒක එතකොට අපි යම් මට්ටමකට දැනගන්න ඕනේ. නමුත් මෙතන මේ විශාල මතක තියාගන්න ප්‍රමාණයක් තියෙන්නේ නැහැ පුතා. එතකොට ඒක අපි aspects තුනක් යටතේ ratios කිහිපයක් තමයි කතා කරන්නේ. එතකොට ඒක ලොකු burden එකක් කියලා මම හිතන්නේ නැහැ. So most probably you may not be given. ඒ වගේම විභාගයේදීත් දැන් ඔයාලට පෙන්නේ අද අපි කේස් එකක් ඩිස්කස් කරනවා. ඒතකොට ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ratios වගේ දේවල් දීලා තියෙනවා. ඔයාලගෙන් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ interpretation එකක්. Good. Right. So it's about the profitability ratios what we are discussing. So now you must be pretty convinced out of these ratios, one of the important ratios is the return on capital employed. Why is that? Because it's a kind of a hybrid one. So it comes as a result of the net profit margin as well as the asset turnover. So just to take you through, you can see that the primary objective of a company is to maximize the profitability. You know, if it is a private sector, profit-oriented organization, yes, they are there to maximize the profit. The profitability ratios can be used to monitor the achievement of this objective. So then you can use these profitability ratios to see to what extent that you are achieving this objective of profit maximization. So in doing so, you can make use of the gross profit margin, the gross profit divided by the turnover or the sales. And it's always the high gross profit margin is desirable because it indicates that either sales price is high or your cost, that is the cost of sales is less. So therefore it's always a higher gross profit margin is favored. So අපි කැමති අපි profitability එක maximize කරන්න යන ආයතනයක් නම් අපිට high profitability gross profit margin එකක් තියෙනවට අපි කැමති. ඒතර ඒකෙන් එකක් කියවෙනවා sales price එක වැඩි, අනිත් පැත්තෙන් අපේ production cost එක කියන්නේ cost of sales අඩුයි කියන එක. Then if I ask you that very simple question, that by increasing the number of units that you would sell, can you increase the gross profit margin? ඔයා විකුණන එක ගාන වැඩි කරලා ඔයාට පුළුවන් ද gross profit එක වැඩි කරන්න? It's a very fundamental question. What do you think? No. Okay, good. So let's see. Is that true? Let's see. No. Good. Appreciate. බලමු අපි ඒක එහෙමද කියලා. To some extent we can. Okay, good. You have a divided opinion. So let's better go and see. So let us take a situation. Let's say there's an entity there. They have the sales of, let's say that they are only selling one unit. They are selling one unit at rupees 50 each. Cost of sales, let's say that they are purchasing them at 30. So accordingly, the gross profit, there it comes. Gross profit is up. If you work out the gross profit margin, it's 40%. So අපි හිතමු මේක දැන් අපි වැඩි කරන්න යන්නේ sales unit ප්‍රමාණයනේ. Here we are selling one unit. අපි හිතමු දැන් අපි units දෙකක් විකුණනවා කියලා. එකක් 50 නම් දෙකක් 100යි. එකක් 30ට ගත්තා නම් දෙකක් ගන්න වෙන්නේ 60ට. නම් gross profit එක 40ක් වෙනවා. So if you take this gross profit divided by the sales, you can see that still it's 40%. So therefore, yes, as most of you have highlighted, that by increasing the sales unit, you cannot impact the gross profit margin. If you are to do so, you might either need to increase the sales price. That sales price increase කරොත් ඒක කරන්න පුළුවන්. අපි හිතුවොත් එක එකකයක් 50ට විකුණලා අනිත් එකකේ අපි 60ට වික්කා. එහෙම වුණොත් අපිට පුළුවන් වෙයි අපේ profit එක වැඩි කරන්න. That works. Even if you think of selling them at 55 each, it's 110. So ඔයාට පේනවා මෙතන earlier it was 20 divided by 50. Now it is 50 divided by 110. So by changing the sales price, increasing the sales price, you can increase the gross profit. Similarly, if you reduce the cost of sales, the same impact could be there, right? Okay. So the gross profit is particularly important because it helps to cover up all the expenses. It helps to cover up the other expenses in order to make a decent profit. There are decent profit එකක් හොයන්න නම් our gross profit has to be large enough to cover the other expenses, the administrative, the selling and distribution, and finance and other. And also when it comes to a particular industry, then there is a kind of an average gross profit for that particular industry. So therefore, that could also be taken as a kind of a measure, as a kind of a benchmark, or as a kind of a target for you to evaluate how profitable you are. For සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි industry එකක් ගත්තාමත් ඒ industry එකට යම්කිසි average gross profit එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒතර ඔයාට ඒක භාවිතා කරන්නත් පුළුවන් ඔයාගේ ආයතනය කොච්චර දුරට profitable ද කියලා බලන්න. So if you find that your gross profit margin is higher than the industry average, then you know that you are profitable, comparatively profitable. Then you come to the next important one. It's about the net profit margin. Simply the net profit divided by the turnover or the sales. Again, high net profit margin is desirable. You prefer to see a higher net profit. It indicates that either sales price are high or that all costs are being kept well under control. So it is as simple as that. If your sales prices are high, yes, it can result in a good profit margin. Or even if you are keeping your cost under control. So if your costs are less, yes, that could also mean a high profit margin. The possibilities of fluctuation over the period. So when it comes to this net profit margin, unlike the gross profit margin, this net profit margin can be fluctuated from period to period. නේ. ඒතර අපි දකිනවා ගොඩක් වෙලාවට gross profit margin කියන එක ආයතනයක වෙනස් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒතර අපි බාණ්ඩ ගන්න යම්කිසි මිලක් තියෙනවා. ඒකට යම්කිසි තියාගන්න profit margin එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒ අනුව it is more or less consistent over the years. Gross profit margin. Namuth, if we take the net profit margin, we may find that it can fluctuate because the expenses what you may come across can be different from period to period, right? So අපි දන්නවා විවිධ administrative expenses, විවිධ selling and distribution, so finance and other මේ expenses period එකෙන් period එකට වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට ඒකේ හේතුවක් වශයෙන් අපිට පේනවා net profit එක අවුරුද්දෙන් අවුරුද්දට fluctuate වෙන්න පුළුවන් කියන කාරණා. So that's what we have highlighted. So there's some music out there. Sometimes you may be hearing that, no? Is that? Or can you still manage to hear properly what I'm saying? Just let me know that I just want to just go and see. We can't hear, no? You can't hear, good. So you are only concentrating on what I'm saying, right? But I'm enjoying some good music out there. Okay, then that's good. So if you cannot hear that, yeah. Good, thank you. Okay, now we are moving on to the third ratio, what we are supposed to look at under the profitability. And I told you that this is one of the superior ratios because it looks at the two dimensions. So one was the profitability, the net profit margin as we discussed, and also the other one, it was the asset turnover or the efficiency aspect. This is a key measure of profitability. So when it comes to the return on capital employed, it's a key measure. It is a net profit as a percentage of the capital employed. The return on capital employed shows the net profit that is generated from each 1 rupee of asset employed. So there is no harm of saying the asset because I explained you the rationale. So you are acquiring the most of the asset, especially the non-current asset, through the money that you have raised. So therefore the capital employed represent the money that you have raised. So therefore it's more or less equal to the assets of the entity. So it's net profit divided by the capital employed, where the capital employed equals total asset less current liabilities or total equity plus the long-term debts or what we call the non-current liabilities. So I told you that earlier when you raised the question, you can simply work out this capital employed by looking at equity plus the non-current liabilities. That is one way, or even you can simply take the total asset and just deduct the current liabilities same. So therefore there can be different ways of calculating that. You don't have to worry about that as long as you are getting the concepts clear. The ROCE is sometimes calculated using operating profit, as I told. So always need not to be the net profit. Even if you are think of using the operating profit, that is even good. Instead of net profit, a higher ROCE is desirable. So an increase in ROCE could be achieved by increasing net profit and even Here it has failed to mention that. Even you can mention that even increasing the efficiency or increasing the asset turnover. So I might mention that, no? Increasing net profit and increasing what we call the net profit is one aspect. The other one is about the efficiency. Efficiency. Right. So that is the two aspects. You can either increase the net profit if possible, or you can either look at the efficiency side. So because it's a hybrid measure. The asset turnover. This is the turnover divided by the capital employed. The asset turnover shows the turnover that is generated from each 1 rupee of asset employed. So the asset turnover here they have taken as the asset divided by the turnover divided by asset. Even you can replace this with the capital employed. So මම කලින් පෙන්නපු විදියට මේ capital employed කියන එක උනත් මෙතෙන්ට ගන්න පුළුවන්. Capital employed කියන එක ගත්තත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ. A high asset turnover is desirable, and increase in the asset turnover could be achieved by increasing turnover, if possible, to increase the sales through the launch of new product or the successful advertising campaign, or reducing the capital employed through the replacement of long-term debt. Simply අපි කතා කරන්නේ මේ තියෙන අපේ two dimensions මේ දෙක බලලා අපිට පුළුවන් තීරණය කරන්න. එක්ක අපිට sales වැඩි කරන්න පුළුවන් නැත්නම් turnover එක එහෙම නැත්නම් අපිට අපේ capital employed වැඩි කරන්න. So capital employed අපිට අඩු කරන්න පුළුවන්. Right? So it's about the inputs and output relationship. Right. With that, we finish the discussion on the four aspects: the profitability, the gross profit margin, the net profit margin, return on capital employed, and asset turnover. Right. So before we move on, if you would like to add anything, or if you would like to get anything clarified, yes, now it's the time. උදාට මොනවා ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා පැහැදිලි කරගන්න ඒක කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. කතා කරලා අපිට ඉස්සරහට යන්න පුළුවන්. Okay, hope you are fine with that. It's something that we have extensively discussed. Okay. Right, let's now look at the other important aspect when it comes to the financial performance indicators. So usually, at the same time, we are getting interested in the profitability of an entity. At the same time, we may be getting interested in the liquidity of an organization. And again, here also you need to understand one thing, that when it comes to this profitability and liquidity, again there is a trade-off. මේ profitability එක සහ liquidity එක අතර trade-off එකක් තියෙනවා. Right? So if you find a particular entity is highly profitable, so sometimes you would find the same entity may be not good in terms of liquidity. So just a kind of a very simple example, say that if an entity who is predominantly makes sales on credit basis, you might find that their profitability would be high. So if you sell goods on credit, so definitely your profitability could be high, right? But at the same time, if you look at the liquidity, like quick ratio, So you may tend to find that uh, your liquidity is not doing good. So if you look at the data collection period, so the data's turnover, so you might find that those are not doing well. Hence, when you come to this profitability and liquidity, again, there's a kind of a trade-off. So you need to understand that. So it is uh, quite rare for a particular organization to be profitable and liquid at the same time. So there is a compromise between these two aspects, right? That is a kind of a general insight that you may need to have on your mind. එක සරල කාරණාවක් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් දැනගන්න ඕනේ, right? Okay, good. So when it comes to these liquidity ratios, again, we can use several ratios, but predominantly we are using the current ratio, so which you are familiar the most, the quick ratio, the inventory holding period, the receivable collection period, and even the payable period. So you can look at these aspects. So when it comes to the liquidity ratio, it measures the firm's ability to meet its maturing financial obligation. So when your short-term obligations become due, uh, what is your position? So can you meet that short-term obligations comfortably when they become due? So then it means you are liquid. Asset turnover ratio, we take total asset. Okay, okay. In the asset turnover ratio, yes, that's what I told you. Here you can see here we have calculated asset turnover using turnover divided by asset. So that is one way. And even if you wish, I have even show you that this asset turnover can be calculated in this particular way. It's the sales divided by capital employed. තවට මේක capital employed කියලා දාලත් ඕනනම් ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ නිසා තමයි මම මේක තවට මෙහෙම පෙන්නුවේ. මම capital employed උත් ඔයාලට ගන්න පුළුවන් කියන කාරණා. Right? Okay. The liquidity ratios measure the firm's ability to meet its maturing financial obligation. The focus is on short-term solvency as if the firm were liquidated today at book value. So if you are liquidated today, so can you comfortably meet the short-term obligation? The company can be profitable, but at the same time encounter cash flow problems. The point, the general point what I have raised earlier, it's over here. You can see that a company can be profitable, but at the same time, they can encounter their cash flows are not well. The liquidity and working capital ratios give some indication of the company's liquidity. The current ratio is the most common liquidity rate measure and provide an indication of a firm's ability to pay short-term claims with short-term asset. So the current ratio is necessarily the relationship between the current asset and the current liability. So it gives you a kind of indication as to the firm's ability to pay the short-term debts when and where they become due, how comfortably that you can meet them. එතකොට අපේ තියෙන ජංගම වත්කම් භාවිතා කරලා අපේ ජංගම වගකීම් when and where they become due අපිට කොච්චර දුරකට ඒවා settle කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කියන එක තමයි මේ current ratio එකෙන් අපි measure කරන්නේ. So usually it's 1:2 ratio is preferred. එතකොට සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි ගන්නවා 1:2 අනුපාතය වගේ කියන එක හොඳයි කියලා. නමුත් but that depends on the industry. ඒක industry එකකින් industry එකට වෙනස් වෙනවා. නමුත් in generally we used to say that a ratio of 1:2 is quite good. It means that for one current liability you have two current assets. Right? 1:2 අනුපාතය වගේ අපි කියනවා ගොඩක් හොඳයි කියලා. නමුත් ඒක depend වෙනවා industry එකත් එක්ක. Right? This is the current ratio divided by the current liabilities, the current asset divided by the current liabilities, that is the ratio. This ratio measures the company's ability to meet its short-term liabilities as they fall due. So this measures the company's ability to meet its short-term obligations as they fall due. A ratio in excess of 1 is desirable, but the expected ratio varies between the type of industry. So usually your current asset is greater than 1, it's always desirable, but you cannot exactly say that. It depends on the type of the industry. A decrease in the ratio year on year or a figure that is below the industry average could indicate that the company has liquidity problem. The company should take steps to improve the liquidity by paying creditors as they fall due or by better management of receivables in order to reduce the level of bad debts. එතකොට අපේ ratio එක අවුරුද්දෙන් අවුරුද්ද අඩු වෙගෙන යනවා නම් එතන අපේ ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපි මොකක්ද කරන්න ඕනේ? We need to have some strategies and we need to improve our liquidity position. අපිට ඒවට කරන්න පුළුවන්. හොඳට අපේ receivables manage කරන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට අපේ bad debts risk එක අඩු වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තමයි අපේ creditors level manage කරන්න පුළුවන්. So when and where they become due, so we must be able to settle them, right? So it's about the current ratio. So one of the main criticisms on this current ratio is that there it can carry some illiquid asset. So when it comes to an organization, the most illiquid asset is considered to be the inventory, right? So if you take this inventory impact out, and that gives you a acid test, or we call it the quick ratio. So once you take the illiquid asset out from the current asset, there you may be having some liquid assets. Then you're comparing this liquid asset against the current liabilities. So when it comes to this quick ratio, generally we are saying that a ratio of 1:1 is a good ratio, but again it depends on the industry. So ඒකත් අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කියනවා ratio එක එකට එක අනුපාතය වගේ තියෙනවා නම් හොඳයි. මොකද දැන් මෙතන අපි ගාව illiquid asset නෙමෙයි තියෙන්නේ comparatively liquid asset. ඒකට අපිට මේ දේවල් කොහොම පහසුවෙන් මුදල් බවට පරිවර්තනය කරගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක නිසා අපිට එකට එක අනුපාතය තිබ්බත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ කියලා, right? It's about another very commonly used ratios to look at the liquidity of an entity. Then we have the inventory holding period. So that is another important aspect. So when it comes to this liquidity, the inventory would play a critical role. So here you can look at the inventory holding period. So the inventory residence period, we call it. This indicates the average number of days that the inventory items are held for. So මෙතනින් පෙන්වන්න කරන්න පුතාලා basically කොච්චර කාලයක් inventory අපි ගාව තියෙනවද කියලා. So we always prefer to have a shorter inventory residence period. So the shorter inventory residence period indicates that you are not having this inventory for a extensive or extended period of time. So වඩා වැඩි කාලයකට inventory අපි ගාව තියෙන්නේ නැහැ කියන්නේ. So ඒක හොඳ inventory management practices එකක් reflect වෙනවා අපි shorter inventory holding period එකක් නම් තියෙනවා. Right? This indicates the average number of days that the inventory items are held for. An increase in the inventory holding period could indicate that the company is having problems selling its product and could also indicate that there is an increased level of obsolete stocks. So it talks about the problems of having kind of a extended or longer inventory holding period. So if you are having kind of longer inventory holding period, it could indicate that you are having certain problems when it comes to selling this product. So your products may be slow moving products. So as a result of that, the inventory may retain in the warehouses for a long period of time, or maybe in the shelf for a long period of time. But inventory ආයතනයේ රාක්කවල නැත්නම් ආයතනයේ තියෙන warehouse වල වඩා වැඩි කාලයක් රැඳිලා පවතින්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම inventory වඩා වැඩි කාලයක් රැඳිලා තියෙනවා කියන එක තුල risk එකකුත් තියෙනවා. මේ inventory can become obsolete. It can become obsolete, can become outdated. The company should take steps to increase the stock turnover by removing any slow moving or unpopular items of the stocks and by getting rid of any obsolete stock. So you can increase the inventory turnover. The inventory turnover in the sense you are very quickly take this inventory, you convert this inventory to a sale, and that's what we call the inventory turnover. So you very quickly convert this inventory to sale. That's inventory turnover. So if you have a higher inventory turnover, that suggests you are having a lower inventory holding period. Inventory turnover එක වැඩි නම් එතකොට අපි දන්නවා inventory holding period එක අඩුයි කියලා නේ. කොහොමද inventory turnover එක ගන්නේ? So how can we take the inventory turnover? Turnover, you take simply the cost of sales divide කරනවා by the inventory. මේක තමයි inventory turnover එක කියන්නේ. So these are some of the ratios that you are pretty much aware of. So inventory residence period කියන්නේ inventory residence period කියන එක අපිට alternatively කියන්න පුළුවන් අවශ්‍ය නම් inventory turnover divided by 365 divided by inventory turnover. 365 බෙදීම number of working days, assuming an organization that works every day, it's inventory turnover. It's inventory turnover. Right. So මේක තමයි මේ inventory turnover කියන එක තමයි මෙතන අරගෙන තියෙන්නේ. Inventory divided by cost of sales into 365. So මේක බෙදීමක් විදියට ගත්තොත් උදාහරණ ගන්නවා. ඒක cost of sales divided by inventory. Right? It's just ratio. So these are very basic aspects. I'm just rushing through that because you can easily read and understand them. Yeah. The company should take steps to increase the stock's turnover by removing any slow-moving or unpopular items. Yeah. A decrease in the inventory holding period could be desirable as the company's ability to turn over inventory has improved, and the company does not have excess cash tied up in the inventory. So it's always preferable to have a kind of a shorter inventory holding period because that indicates that you can easily convert your inventory into sales, as well as you are not you're not keeping the excess money tied up in the inventory. So not a larger amount of money is stuck in this inventory. That's not the case. So the inventory holding period එක අඩු වෙනවා කියන්නේ අපේ inventory බොහොම ඉක්මනින් sales වලට පරිවර්තනය වෙනවා සහ අපේ මුදල් වැඩි වශයෙන් ඒකේ තුල ආයෝජනය වෙලා රැඳවිලා තියෙන්නේත් නැති වෙනවා කියන්නේ. Right? Similarly, moving on to the receivables collection period, the same aspects. It's about the receivables divided by credit sales into 365. Then it shows that the receivable collection period. Again, alternatively, you can take 365 divided by the receivables turnover. The receivables turnover, as you take earlier, it is credit sales divided by receivables. So මේකත් පුතාලට අර විදිහටම ගන්න පුළුවන්. Receivables turnover එකක් ගණනය කරන්න පුළුවන් අපිට. Receivables turnover it is simply the receivables credit sales divided by receivables. No? It's credit sales divided by receivables. Right. Credit sales receivables වලින් divide කරපුවම අපිට receivables turnover වෙනවා. So in order to take the receivables collection period, you can take 365 divided by the receivables turnover. Receivables. So this is it. This is the average period it takes for a company's debtors to pay what they owe. So to settle the outstanding, usually or generally, what is the time period that these debtors are taking? An increase in the receivables collection period could indicate that the company is struggling to manage its debt. So increase in the receivables collection, it means that you are not exercising a good control over your receivables. The possible steps to reduce the ratio include the credit check on customers to ensure that they will pay on time. So you can keep track of your employees, you can keep track of your customers. So you can time to time you can send the reminders and ensure that you are getting the money, the outstanding amounts from the customers are collected on time. And also you can improve your credit control, the invoicing on time and chasing up the bad debts. So you're not simply letting the debts to be bad. You're simply chasing them and somehow it's going to collect the money, right? So අපිට පුළුවන් අපේ හොඳ credit controls ඇති කරන්න. ඒ වගේම අපිට credit checks on customers. तर මේ වගේ methods වලින් අපිට පුළුවන් ensure කරන්න we are collecting the money on time, right? So these are some of the stuff that you can easily read and understand, right? Okay. So moving on to the payables period. Moving on to the payables period. So that is another important aspect when it comes to our the liquidity. The payables would also play a crucial role, especially when it comes to this current assets and current liabilities. So from the current liabilities, the payables would be a significant component. So therefore, the payables payment periods sorry, is also an important aspect. So here also you can calculate the payables turnover as we used to do earlier. It's credit purchases divided by the payables, and that's the payable turnover. It's 365 divided by the payable turnover, that is the payable period. Or even you can stick to this. This is the average period it takes for a company to pay for its purchases. So if you have to better manage the credit, what you should need to ensure that your payable period must be greater than the receivables period. So අපි හොඳ liquidity position එකක් maintain කරන්න අමතරව අපි කරන්න ඕන දෙයක් තමයි අපේ receivable period එක අපි අඩු කර ගන්න ඕන credit period එකට වඩා. right? එතකොට අපි receivable period එක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මාසයක් වගේ තියාගත්ත 30 days වගේ අපි දෙනවා නම් එතකොට අපි අපේ payable period එක අපි set කර ගන්න ඕනේ. So you need to negotiate that payables period maybe 45 days. දින 45කින් ගෙවන්නවා. මාසේ කාමාරකින් ගෙවන්නවා. ඒතර receivables මාසෙකින් collect කරගන්නවා. comfortably ඔයාගේ creditors වලට ගෙවනවා දවස් 45කින්. ඒතර ඒ වගේ වෙලාවක අන්න better management එකක්. So you manage your credit better. Then you may not run into the liquidity problems. නේ? හැබැයි මේක අනිත් පැත්ත වුණා. අපි දින 45කින් collect කරලා දින 30න් ගෙවන තත්ත්වයක් නම් අපි හදාගෙන ඉන්නේ. Then you will definitely run into problems. An increase in the company's payable period could indicate that the company is struggling to pay its debts as they fall due. So මෙතන නමුත් අපි set කරගත්ත payables period එකටත් වඩා අපිට පේනවා නම් යනවා කියලා. ඒතකොට එතන indicate කරනවා අපි මොනවා හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා කියන එක. However, it could simply indicate that the company is taking better advantage of any credit period offered to them. එතකොට credit period එක වැඩි වෙනවා කියන එක නරක දෙයක්ුත් නෙමෙයි. company පැත්තෙන් බලපුවම සමහරට අපි ඒකේ තියෙන advantage එක ගන්නවා වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. ඒතකොට ඒකේ දෙපැත්තක් තියෙනවා. එක්ක කියනවා එක අපිට අමාරුයි pay කරන එක. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි ඒකේ advantage එක ගන්නවා වැඩි කාලයක් ගන්න ගමන්. Right? So it's some of the insights that you can draw from the payables period, right? So that is about another important aspects, that is the liquidity. So when it comes to a particular organization, especially when it comes to the performance measurement, you may be interested in the profitability as well as the liquidity. And another important aspect that you'll be looking at, that is what we call the risk, or we call it the leverage, gearing, different terms. But basically what you are looking at, that is the risk aspect. The financial gearing, the interest cover, or even the dividend cover, right? So මේ ආයතනයේ තියෙන risk එක නැත්නම් අපි කියනවා මේ long term liquidity එක කියලා. දැන් මේ දක්වා අපි කතා කරේ basically දාලා short term liquidity position එක. Right? දැන් අපි බලන්න යන්නේ long term liquidity තත්ත්වය. Right? So what about the long term liquidity, or we call it the leverage or gearing? So usually we are using the three ratios: the financial gearing, the interest cover, and even the dividend cover. We look at the risk. The leverage ratios measure the relative amount of funds supplied by equity and debt holders. So you are simply going to looking at the relationship between the money contributed by the shareholders and the money contributed by the debt holders. It's simply the equity divided by the debts, or it's what we call the non-current liabilities. The focus is on the long-term solvency of the firm. So earlier from the liquidity, we were looking at the short-term solvency. Now here we are looking at, as I told you, this is the long-term solvency. In general, higher the amount of debt financing relative to equity financing, the more leverage the firm is, and greater the risk to its owners. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපේ debt financing, අපේ debt capital එක වැඩි නම් equity capital වලට වඩා, ඒතර අපි ඒක කියනවා more leveraged entity එකක් කියලා. Say that, for example, if you take your leverage, leverage එක ගත්තොත්, let's say that your debt capital is 1.5 million, while your equity capital is 1 million, and we call it's more leverage. It's a more leverage company. You are having a debt compared to equity. So here we get it, debt divided by equity. Right? So මෙතන අපිට පේනවා තියෙන්නේ more leverage situation එකක්. So අපි generally කියනවා මේක risky කියලා. Right? In general, yeah. It's not exactly or not precisely, but in generally we are saying that it's risky. Right? ඒක risk එකක් කියලා කියනවා. Especially if the economy is going through some downturns. So අපි හිතුවත් ආර්ථිකය මේ downturn එකක් නම් තියෙන්නේ දැන් වර්තමානයේ වගේ. So see this corona pandemic. So can you imagine the poor position of the business organization who had relied more on debts? So අපිට හිතා ගන්න පුළුවන් නේද මේ වගේ කාලයක ණය ප්‍රාග්ධනය මත වැඩි වශයෙන් රැඳිලා පැවතුණු ආයතන වලට සිද්ධ වෙන ඊරණම මොකක්ද කියන එක, in the sense. So if you had obtained more debts, it means that you need to make the interest. So irrespective of the profit, you need to make that. So that is the main point. So මෙතන තියෙන ප්‍රධානම දේ තමයි අපි debt ගත්තා කියන්නේ අනිවාර්යයෙන් මෙතන fixed commitment එකක් තියෙනවා. අපි 112ට පොලියට ගත්තේ කියලා. ඒතර ඔයා ලාභ තිබුණත් නැතත් වාර්ෂිකව 1,80,000ක් ගෙවන්න ඕන. So if the economy is going through a downturn, you know that your profitability is quite less. You are not making some good sales. So therefore not good profit. If you do not make good profit, you might find it difficult to pay this interest. The interest given එක ඔයාට ලේසි වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Right? So the nature of this debt capital is that irrespective of the profit, you need to pay this. ඒකට තව දන්නවා debt capital වල තියෙන characteristic එක තමයි එතන අපිට obligation එකක් තියෙනවා. ලාභ තිබ්බද නැද්ද කියන එක බැංක් එක worry වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Financial institutes worry වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට ලාභ තියෙනවද නැද්ද කියන එක. එයාලා කියන්නේ ගත්ත ණයට පොලිය ගෙවන්න. So if the economy is going through some bad times, yes, so definitely, so you would struggle. But if the economy is in a boom, if the economy is performing really well, so it's really good to rely on more interest. It's good to rely on more debts. නමුත් economy එක හොඳට boom එකක් නම් තියෙන්නේ ඒ වගේ වෙලාවක අපි debts ගත්තට කමක් නැහැ. මොකද අපිට හොඳට ඒවට serve කරන්න පුළුවන් debts serve කරන්න පුළුවන් ඒ නිසා අපිට ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. So it doesn't matter if we are taking more debts. But for economic downturn, if you had raised the finance through equity, it's not a problem. Say that you are making some losses. Losses. No problem. You don't have to pay any dividend. You don't have to pay any dividend. So as long as you make the losses, you don't have to. Even if you make some profit, you don't have to. So that is the advantage of equity, right? But if the economy is doing really well, so if you had relied more on the debts, you could comfortably serve this debt, you could comfortably pay the interest, and thereby you could have generated a huge profit to the equity holders. නමුත් economy එක හොඳ boom එක තියෙන වෙලාවක ඔයා interest ඔයා debt capital නම් අරන් තියෙන්නේ ඔයාට බොහොම පහසුවෙන් interest ටික ගෙවලා හොඳ ලොකු return එකකට අරගෙන යන්න තිබ්බා අපේ ආයතනය ඉන්න equity holders වලට ලොකු profit එකක් ඔයාට නැත්නම් ලොකු return එකක් ඔයාට ඇති කරලා දෙන්න තිබුණා. So that is about the leverage, right? So in general, the higher the amount of debt financing relative to the equity financing, the more leverage the firm is and the greater the risk. On the other hand, higher leverage is usually associated with higher expected return. So higher leverage, so if the economy is doing good, really good, if you are in an economic boom, it means that it generates higher returns, high profits. So because your equity is less, but the return is high. Return high. As with the liquidity ratios, there's no magic value for the leverage ratio. So even though the finance theories try to establish a certain value for this, the particular, what you call the optimal value for that, you know, there are different theories, no, to establish what the optimal combination of debt and equity, but still there's no magic value for the leverage ratio. If too much debt is used, the risk of being unable to meet the fixed debt obligation can become greater. So the more you rely on the debts, if something bad happens, like economic downturn, so you might find it difficult to serve the debt. ආර්ථිකය යන්නේ downturn එක නම් ඔයා වැඩිපුර ණය අරන් තිබුණා නම් ඔයාට අනිවාර්යයෙන් මේක ගොඩක් අපහසු වෙන්න ඉඩ තියෙනවා. On the other hand, if it is little debt is used, the firm may sacrifice return that can be realized through leverage. ඒ වගේම තමයි අපිට කියන්න බෑ අපි debt අරගෙන තියෙන එක වාසිදායකයි කියලා. මොකද අපි equity වලින් finance කරලා තියෙන එක අපිට කියන්න බෑ මේක වාසිදායකමයි කියලා. ඒකට අපේ economy එක හොඳින් කරන තත්ත්වයක් තුල අපි දන්නවා when it comes to the cost of equity is quite higher than the cost of debt, right? debt වල cost එක වගේ නෙමෙයි equity වල cost එක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි දන්නවා ගොඩක් විශාලයි. එතකොට සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි දන්නවා debt වලට 12ක් වගේ යනවා නම් අපි dividend එකක් declare කරලා බැලුවොත් එතකොට ඒක work out කරලා බැලුවොත් අපේ cost එකක් විදිහට අපිට පෙනේ සමහරට ඒක 25ක් 30ක් වගේ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතර අපි profits වලින් අපි ඒ වගේ percentage එකක් අපි 30% dividend එකක් pay කරනවා කියන්නේ ඒතර එතන ලොකු cost එකක් තියෙනවා. පිටුම ආයතනය ලාභ ලබනවා 500ක් කියලා. ඒතර මේ 500න් අපි හිතමු 100ට 30ක් dividend ගෙවනවා කියලා. ඒතකොට 500න් 130ක් කියන්නේ 150. අපි 140ක් විතර 140ක් විතර ගෙවනවා කියන්නේ 60ක් රඳවගෙන එතකොට 200. එතකොට අපේ ඉන්නවා equity 1000යි. 200 බෙදීම 1000. බලන්න cost එක 120යි. See how costly that is. ඒක හොඳයි loss එකක් make කරන situation එක ඒක හොඳයි. නමුත් profit make කරන situation එක අපිට පේනවා equity කියන්නේ හොඳ දෙයක් නෙමෙයි. So this is a dividend. It's a kind of a dividend. And this is the equity that you have. 1000 equity තිබ්බා. So 200 between 200 divided by 1000, it means 20%. But here you are only paying 180 divided by 1500. 1500ට මොයාගේ වන්නේ 112. 180 ඒ කියන්නේ 112. Compare to 12 versus 20. So therefore it's a huge difference. Huge difference is out there. Yeah. So it's about the risk. So therefore you cannot say that what is good. Is it good to be more leverage or is it good to be low leverage? You cannot say that. It depends. It depends on the situation of the country. So it's depends on what's going on in the country. So what's going on with the business? If you find that if you are a more profitable entity, better to rely on debts. If you find that you are a low profitable entity, better to rely on equity. So likewise, you need to look at. So what is the combination of that? So this is it. When it comes to the gearing, you can usually divide the debt by equity, or otherwise you can take this debt divided by debt plus equity. So either way you can put it. A high level of gearing indicates that the company relies heavily on debt to finance its long-term needs. This increases the level of risk for the business since interest and capital repayment must be made on debt, whereas there is no obligation to make payment to equity. So as we discussed, it shows what is the risk involved in debt financing. The ratio could be improved by reducing the level of long-term debts and raising long-term finance using equity. So that is the ways of reducing your leverage. Then the interest cover. So this is particularly important, especially so if you have to approach a kind of a bank loan. So if you are to attract more debt capital, you need to show that you are doing well in terms of interest cover. So your profits are quite good enough to cover this interest cost. So maybe certain times. So usually we calculate this interest cover in terms of what you call the times. So it's always a higher interest cover is preferable. So it looks favorable in the eyes of the debt capital providers. Say that your organization is making an operating profit of say 560, and your interest, let's say your interest is 180. අපි හිතමු ඔයාගේ interest විදියට ගෙවනවා 180ක්. ඒ වගේම ඔයාගේ operating profit එකක් තියෙනවා කියලා. sorry. ඔයාගේ interest එකක් තියෙනවා 180ක්. ඔයාගේ operating profit එකක් තියෙනවා 560ක් කියලා අපි හිතමු. So what's your interest cover? So your profits are capable of covering interest 3 times. Right? එතකොට මෙතනින් මොකක්ද කියවෙන්නේ? By using the profit of 1 year, you can cover the interest of 3 years. So මේක අපි interpret කරගන්නේ කොහොමද? එක අවුරුද්දක operating profit එකකින් අපිට පුළුවන් අවුරුදු 3ක interest cover කරගන්න. So higher the number, more preferable. Higher the number, more the preferable. මේ number එක වැඩි වෙන්න කැමති debt capital providers, because that gives them more comfort. A decrease in the interest cover indicates that the company is facing an increased risk of not being able to meet its finance payment as they fall due. So මේක අඩු වෙනවා නම් ඒකින් කියවෙන්නේ අපේ profits පහළ යන තත්ත්වය. The ratio could be improved by taking steps to increase operating profit through better management of cost or reducing finance costs through reducing the levels of debt. So those are the strategies to make it to a good interest cover. And finally, the dividend cover that could also uh, be used when it comes to the risk, the assessment of the risk in the performance measurement. We are looking at the dividend cover as well. So it's simply the net profit divided by the dividend. So here also, so we would prefer a higher interest cover. It suggests that we are making some good profits, right? So if you are having a kind of interest cover of 5 times, means that so the entity is capable of paying from the 1 year's profit the dividend for 5 years. අවුරුදු 5කට dividend එක ගෙවන්න capable කියලා කියවෙනවා. එක අවුරුද්දක profit එකෙන්. අපේ dividend cover එක 5ක් නම් ඒකට අපි දන්නවා එක අවුරුද්දක profit එකෙන් ඒක අවුරුදු 5ක dividend ගෙවන්න පුළුවන් කියන. The decrease in the dividend cover indicates that the company is facing an increased risk of not being able to make its dividend payment to shareholders. You might find that it's difficult to make the payment for your investors, especially the shareholders, right? Okay, right. So we have discussed for so long period of time. I think it's 2 hours at a stretch. So shall we have a break of 10 minutes time and continue? मतलब විනාඩි 10ක වගේ break එකක් කරන් continue කරමුද? So since we have discussed so long period of time, even you might find it boring. Boring වෙන්න පුළුවන් නේ. So let's take a break of 10 minutes and then we are going to meet. And I would say that after the break, that is going to be the most important discussion begins because we are going to looking at the exam type case study. Case study එකක් අපි බලනවා පුතාලා. මේකේ නම් slides පහයි තියෙන. මේ පහ නෙමෙයි වඩා වැදගත්ම දේ ඒකත් වැදගත්. ඒක බලලා අපි යනවා most important question එකක් discuss කරන්න. So we have uploaded that question. You can download it even and then we may look at that, right? Now have a break and refresh yourself and come back, then we'll continue.